Good afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and welcome to our virtual Wayland Library event. This afternoon, we're excited to have Renee Bolivar from Gardens by Renee here to talk to us about garden planning from seed to table. Thank you so much to Renee for being here. I have a couple of housekeeping notes. First, we're recording this session for broadcast on Waycam, our local cable access station, and you will also be able to access it on YouTube. So you may see your tiny video screen on TV or YouTube unless you turn off your video. Renee will be sharing a few slides and then we'll open up for questions. So feel free to type your questions into the chat at any time or just go ahead and unmute and ask your question. We're a small group. When she is sharing, I recommend that you choose the speaker view so that you'll see Renee next to her slides. And finally, Renee would love to add you to her email list. So if you're okay with that, please let me know by chat or email if you're not okay with that, and I will take you off the list. So now that we've got that all out of the way, we're ready to get started, and I'll hand it over to Renee.
All right, great. Thank you. Hi, Lisa. Sorry, I've been growing with Lisa for years, so it's wonderful to see her here taking advantage of this platform. I'm super excited, and spring is coming. It's going to be 60 degrees this week. The snow is going to melt, the ground is going to thaw, and we're going to get out there. And just today, I was telling Courtney that I went on to Johnny's Select Seeds to get some more snap peas, and they're not selling to residents or home gardeners right now, only to commercial. So last year during the pandemic, it was challenging. The supply chain was damaged and overworked and stressed out, and it was really hard to get plants. And I don't want to be a buzzkill. It's just a reality. It's not going to be any better this year, and that just totally confirmed what I'm feeling. So if you are starting your garden for the first time this year, get your seeds ordered, go and get them at the stores. I'm sure Russell's already has them, Mahoney's, your local nurseries, garden centers, get online. Do order your seeds as soon as possible because, again, like I said, I don't think that there's going to be an abundance of seed available for us, especially if you want specific varieties. So my format is free range chicken. I'm more here to answer your questions. I have tons of experience. It's my passion. It's what I do best. So don't be afraid to ask your questions via chat, raise your hand, say hi. I'm hoping everyone got the document last night, and I apologize that it was delivered late. I was hoping to give it to you a little bit in advance so you could review it. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just scroll through it really quickly. And again, jump in, don't be shy. Like, I'm here to give you everything I have going on in here, all my experience, Gardens by Renee. This is 11, 12 years. I've been digging in the dirt and gardening since I was, 4 or 5 years old with my mom in Provincetown on the Cape. So this is my life, and take advantage of it because this is a great way to get inspired and to learn a lot. So let's just go ahead and get started because I know there's going to be a lot of questions. So Seed to Table 2021, that is my goal, is to take you from seed, literally, to the table. And I do that through design, build, and installation and care of edible landscapes and sustainable landscapes, growing boxes, kitchen gardens, beehives, bat houses, really wanting to connect people to nature, food, and one another, which is what we're doing right now all together. So it's all about, where do we start? And the first thing with garden is garden planning. And really, you could have done this in January. I started this year in November, ordering seeds, making my crop maps, and making lists of what I needed to get. I knew that I needed to get a jump start on it earlier based on the previous year's experience with running out of things. So you're not too late, so don't worry about it. We can still get it done. You might not get the exact varieties you want. You might have to wait longer than you want to for your growing boxes and things like that, but you're still going to be okay. We just have to get on it. So where am I going to be growing and what am I going to be growing? The biggest and most important thing, besides for water, is your sunlight. Gardens need at a minimal 6 hours of sunlight. And sometimes you might read that you can grow in part shade, and it's really not true. You run into a lot of problems when you don't have sun. So you want to have full sunlight, 6 hours at a minimum. I like to face my garden south, southwest, and it's hard for me to give you an example because I'm not face to face with you right now, but if you think about being a big, tall tomato plant or corn stalk, if you're having to lean, so you also want to think about what you plant. Plant your tall ones in the back, plant your medium ones, and then your short ones. If you're growing in a growing box, you want to make sure everything is lined up properly when it comes to sun exposure. So who's going to be what am I going to be growing? Are you growing food for variety? I saw there was a couple little pickles on here. I think it was James Markey. I think there was a couple little boys that I saw. Are we growing to educate, to give our children an experience? Great. You can put a lot of different fun things in the garden. Or are you a food glutton like myself? So for me, I want so much food that I don't know what to do with it. I want to have tomatoes coming out the ha-ha. I want to give them away. I want to be like, I don't want any more tomatoes by the end of the season. So for me, it's all about more, 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 more. So what are why are you growing? Are you growing for the experience, or are you growing to actually produce food to feed your family? I have 3 teenage sons and I start my gardens early. I have about 8 raised beds, but then I also have plot space and I put food everywhere. It's in my, up on my patio, it's in containers, it's in the yard amongst the perennials. I do a lot of mingling and I feed my guys. We're picking lettuce and we're growing and eating from the garden, probably May through November easily. So that's something to think about too. We are in zone 6. That's something that's really important for everybody to know who's growing. If I'm assuming everyone is from Wayland, that might not be true, but we are actually zone 6A. So that's important for you to know when you're starting your seeds and to know when you're buying your plants. And that's true for your edible as well as for your perennial. What am I growing in? So I grow in growing boxes. It used to be called raised beds. I think growing box helps us to, it's more modern, it's newer. I just don't love raised beds. The growing boxes that I grow in are usually 3x10, 3x12, and I like to say a depth of at least 12 inches. A lot of my boxes are actually 22 to 25 inches high, and that's because I'm getting old and I don't want to bend over. It also helps with critters. You still need to protect them, but the higher the bed. Lisa's actually getting ready to do a new garden. And we're doing the higher height because of the critters or because of the back?
We're doing the higher height because rabbits last year ate everything. They ate all of my jalapeno peppers. They ate my green beans. They ate everything. And after you put so much time into planting and taking care of it, for someone to eat it was a little frustrating. So we are doing it definitely for protection and also for the back eventually, but definitely for protection for this year.
And aesthetics, right? Like sometimes the growing boxes just look better. And I'm vain, and that's just who I am. I want my gardens to look as good as they are productive. I always like to tell people they need to be magazine worthy, and I just feel that way. So the higher boxes, they just look great. They're like a really nice piece of furniture in your backyard. And that's something that I also tell people, like, don't put baby in the corner. Like, don't say you're putting in a victory garden and throw it over in the corner where it's like shady and nobody even sees it. I like to see gardens front and center, right in the front yard. I like to see them on the back patio, wherever the sun is, really, and wherever you have access, where you can get there conveniently. If you put something out in the back of your yard in the middle of, corner, you're not going to go out there. The animals are going to hang out there and nobody else is. So you really want it close to the house. So what are you growing in? I grow in growing boxes. You can grow in whiskey barrels. You can grow in fabric bags, containers, tires. That's debatable. People have different feelings on that. Should I pause, take a breath? Are there any questions right yet? Am I moving too fast? Are we good? How's everyone feeling? Talk to me. Anything?
We have one question, Renee. Do you know of a good source for 1 to 2 yards of high quality compost?
Just plain compost. I like Black Earth and I like Brick End Farm. You can check with Pure Solution in Weston. That is where I get mine. And if you call them and you ask them for Renee's special blend, it's a growing blend that's got a couple of ingredients. It's, secret. I can't tell anybody. It's my secret recipe. But if you're just looking for compost, you can call them. And be careful with the compost. I don't know what you're using it for. Compost is awesome, but you don't want to over compost because in the garden, too much fertilizer, too much water, and even too much compost isn't necessarily a good thing. The too much compost almost never happens. People don't put enough. I put compost in every time I plant a perennial, every time I add new seeds, I sprinkle new compost, but just be careful of that. I tend to go with half compost, half loam mix and add that. So Pure Solution in Weston, you can get bulk delivery of compost, or you can ask them for Renee's special blend. Thanks for the question.
Sure. We have one more if you're ready for it.
Of course, fire away.
If you're
What
growing
I'm here for.
if you're growing in pots, are there certain plants that are most suited to these? Ones that critters won't eat? So like pots versus beds, and does
Just
it make a
higher.
difference?
You got to get the height. And even then, I mean, they make beautiful tall. I like the planters that are on legs and then it's a box on top of that, because then they're up like 29 inches. It depends on what kind of critters you're talking about. And because people will call me and they'll talk about chipmunks and like, there's no container that's going to protect you from chipmunks. Like, they're coming. So you're going to have to wrap it with netting or fabric. And sometimes we just have to share. There's also great products out there that you can use, like pepper sprays, which Lisa, I'm really surprised that they ate your jalapenos, because like one of the biggest organic pest deterrents is pepper spray. So like what happened there? Like, I don't know. But so containers, I like to plant in all sorts of containers. I use wine, you get the wine buckets. That's great for lettuce. Whiskey barrels, great for bigger plants. 5-gallon bucket pail is one of my favorite. It's ugly. It's certainly not the prettiest looking thing, but it's fantastic for tomatoes. So when people call me and they say, I just want to grow some tomatoes and basil, what's a good size container? Think of a 5-gallon bucket. It's got the depth and it's got the width that tomatoes like. And you could also grow potatoes in like a trash can, things like that. All right, so I guess we'll move on. Who's tending the garden? So this is one that I really like to say, like, for real. Like, who's taking care of the garden? Are you taking care of the garden? Are the kids taking care of the gardens? Are you bringing in a professional like Gardens by Renee to tend the garden for you? Each, I would say, 3x12 bed, it's about 15 minutes 3 times a week. This is where I tap into the importance of having irrigation. I don't want people out watering by hand for an hour, because that just takes up too many calories and too much energy and too much time. So if you can do the irrigation, I highly recommend it, because then you can spend your time, and I am practicing organic methods, checking for stress, checking for bugs, picking, harvesting, planting. So who's going to take care of the garden? And when you start, I have a client right now, a potential client who just emailed me yesterday, and she wants 6 raised beds. 6 raised beds is a time commitment. That's a good amount of time, So think about what you're doing and set yourself up for success, not failure. I want everyone to be super excited about growing their own food. And I actually believe everyone should be growing their own food in their own backyard. If for nothing else, to actually know how our food grows, right? Like, broccoli grows on a stalk, cucumbers grow on a vine, carrots grow under the ground. And you might be laughing because most of the people here might be people who are already gardeners, but there are people who do not know this. If it's not wrapped in plastic in a saran packaging, they don't know what it is, and they don't know where it came from. So I believe everyone should be growing food, even if it's 1 bucket of herbs. It's like, just get out there and learn how to grow your own food. I digress. That's what happens off track. But anyway, so think about your time management. Think about who's taking care of the garden. Know that there are professionals out there that'll help you, so you don't have to go it alone. And start slow. You can always add boxes. Lisa, I'm picking on you because your face is in front of me, and so far you're the only one that I see that I recognize. But like, Lisa's a great example. She started small with 1 growing box, but created a garden enclosure that allowed for growth for the following year. So once her children participated and enjoyed it, and they all of a sudden had this cool space to go hang out in as a family, then the following year they're going to add, and now again they're adding further. So start small. Would you want to chime in on that? Is that accurate? Do you feel like, I mean, I could have told you put in 20, right?
Yeah, I started with 1 box and put irrigation in, which I highly recommend. And then I had little irrigation spigots going around that I could put in tall planters. So if you do use planters, I use them all the time. I have mint in a planter. I have my sugar snap peas sometimes in a planter, or my cucamelons. I have them in a planter, and they grow against my fence in my enclosed space. But I love it. If I could go back again, I would have put in 2 boxes to begin with. then my kids can start planting what they want to plant and tend to that. It's just so much fun. It's such a great way. I would find myself out there, and then my whole family would be out there with me. And it was just a great activity for everyone to get together.
That's what we love. Courtney, any questions before I move on? No questions. Okay, we got a shy group here. Either that or they know more than you guys. Got anything to share with me? I'm looking to learn here. Tell me what you got. Tell me your
Actually,
experience.
Renee, I wanted to put a link to the soil folks in Weston. How do you spell that company?
Pure,
Oh,
P-U-R,
Pure. Okay.
Pure Solutions.
Okay.
Yep. So, yep, just say Renee sent me and they'll hook you up.
Okay.
So this is fun. What must I have? And just can't imagine the season. I can't see because of that. What am I excited to try? What can I easily do away with? This changes for me year to year. But Lisa just brought up cucamelons. I can't stand them. And every client that has children loves them. A Mexican sour gherkin, cucamelons, it's kind of like a combination between a lime and a cucumber. So for me, I want either a cucumber or a lime. I don't want to be confused in my brain as to what I'm eating. They're super prolific. They grow like crazy. They drop on the ground and then they self-sow. So you end up with a lot of them. But they're great for families. They're wonderful. It's the same with ground cherry. I don't need to grow ground cherries ever again. They make a mess. They drop everywhere. The birds eat them and poop them seeds everywhere. And then I got choke cherry, ground cherries, husk cherries all over my yard. What I can't do without Swiss chard, collard greens, arugula. Last year I grew Chinese multicolored spinach, and it looks like an amaranth. Oh, it's right here. Let me just get it up here. Look at that. Like, you wouldn't even know that you could eat that. You would say, what is that? That looks like coleus or a beautiful perennial for my flowers. The other benefit to this plant is that it's a leafy green, but it's a summer plant. So you don't get a lot of the leafy greens that love the heat. This plant I use as filler in all of my garden beds. So as spring ends, because we're getting into spring first, and we'll have that April, May, June. But then as you get into July, you're pulling your romaine, you're pulling your bolted lettuces, and then you kind of have space in the garden before the tomatoes and the zucchini and the cucumbers come in. This Japanese, it's Baker Creek is the seed company, and hopefully they'll have it now that I'm recommending it. But this is a great filler. It's tasty. You can saute it. It's beautiful in salads. But for the most part, it's just the fact that it's a leafy green that grows in the heat. And that's huge. So all my gardens will get this leafy green, this Chinese, Japanese, oh my God, this Chinese spinach. This is going to be one that's going to go in my garden. That chard, like I said, arugula, have to have it, have to. A lot of people go with tomatoes and cucumbers, and I actually feel like if you are limited on space, you could do away with tomatoes, because you can get tomatoes at farmers market, at the store, on the side of the road. They're pretty, available. So sometimes to me, having the leafy green so that I can have a salad every night, that tends to be more important to me.
Renee, we have a question. Maybe you're going to get to this, but do you have a website or resource you'd recommend to tell us what we can plant when for our zone? Like, what can we plant in the early spring?
Sure. So if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, all of my social media platforms, but I find Facebook and Instagram to be the easiest. I've already put down seed starting charts and what to plant when. And I always am, I mean, there's 4 to 6 posts per day with what I'm doing. So when I go out to plant snap peas, there's going to be a post about that. But I think maybe 2 weeks ago, I had put the seed starting timetable. Farmer's Almanac is a place where you can get that information, or you can follow me. I'm hoping to be the source for all that. This is the goal, right? Growing with everyone. So here's a question most people don't think to ask. When do you harvest? When do you harvest? How frequently? So this is really important. Most of my clients, I maintain their gardens for them, so I'm there once a week. When you're choosing your crops for your garden, again, who's tending the garden? How much time do I have to spend in the garden? Because with some plants, like bush beans, green beans, you want to pick them like every 36 hours. So every 2 to 3 days, you have to pick them. And if you don't keep picking them, they get seedy and fat and tough. But more importantly than that, the plant stops producing. It says, okay, it's time for the next phase of my life. So if you got a pole bean, the Vortex is the one that I love by Johnny's. They don't have it, so you can't even go get it. They've already sold out of it. You can pick that plant at 6 inches, 8 inches, 10 inches. I've picked them at 12 inches long, and they're still tender, they're still sweet, delicious, and they keep growing. So you want to make sure that you're picking plants that work for your lifestyle. So if you're always on the Cape, or if the Cape House is where the garden is and you're here, then make sure that you have plants that don't need to be picked every 36 hours because they'll just stop producing. Carrots, set it and forget it. You stick them in the ground, and you do have to do the thinning, but 60 days later, you're picking carrots. So that's something when people do travel away in the summer, I often recommend. Don't give up the garden here when you go to your summer place. Like, just plant things that are just kind of, put them in the beets, turnip, summer turnip, whatever, carrots. Those are examples of just put them in the ground and then leave. Don't plant tomatoes and cucumbers and zucchini at your home when you're going to be traveling for most of the summer. It just doesn't really make any sense. With tomatoes, I like to point out that they're determinate or indeterminate. So determinate tomatoes are like Romas. So I grow about 8 to 10 Romas. And then as soon as they're all ripe and ready to go, you harvest them all at once. And that's when you're making your paste or your sauce. And then indeterminate are the vining tomatoes that just keep going and going and going and going and going. What I do recommend to my clients is that sometime in late fall, in September-ish, mid-September, late September, start pruning the tops of your vining indeterminate tomato plants and stop them from sending out new shoots and new branches, because you want to force them to ripen what's already on the plant. So at some point, just pinch them back and stop them from growing. So indeterminates will just keep going, going, and going. Determinants all ripen at one time. I already did the summer traveling, so glad I got that up. What are my edible expectations? I think we kind of already talked about this too. Like, why are you growing? Like, what do you want to do with this? Another example I used is eggplant. I had to have eggplant in my life one year, and because I love it. Well, I grew 6 plants. You don't need to grow 6 plants of eggplant, like, ever. Same with hot pepper. So do I love them? Yeah. But how many hot peppers do you actually eat? Unless you're making sauce, you don't need 6 hot pepper plants. You barely need 2 or 1. 1 is plenty. So, think about what you want with your garden and what you want from your garden. Think about what your expectations are. What are you going to do with it? I love, more is better for me. If I end up giving away food, I'm happy about it. I love to share with neighbors and with friends. So for me, it's all about abundance. For others, it might just be about having that beautiful herb garden with 1 tomato and 1 this, just pretty easily managed. You really want to think about what your goals are for your garden this year before you start ordering. Like, I just had another a job today I went to earlier. I had a little event, and she had so many seed packs. She'll never use all those seeds, not this year by herself. It'll probably take her 3 or 4 years to get through all those seeds. So another thing you can do is, if you have friends or in your neighborhood and people are growing, you can share seeds. So just think about what you're doing and what your goals are. I think that's all there is there. You can find a lot of information on most of my social media. My website's kind of generic. It serves its purpose, but the best place is to follow me on Instagram or Facebook. So any other questions? Sweet potatoes, I wrote that down. I just ordered sweet potatoes. I'm super excited about that. Sweet potatoes are a southern crop, but they're beautiful. And I grew up on the Cape clamming. So when you dig up sweet potatoes, it's kind of like clamming. The tubulars sit on top. It's fun. Potatoes are a great thing to grow. You can grow them in all sorts of containers, aluminum cans, fabric bags, buckets. So potatoes, sweet potatoes, those are fun crops. Rhubarb is another plant that I absolutely love. I think everyone should have rhubarb in their perennial beds. I think when you throw in a boxwood or you throw in, a Shasta daisy, you should throw in a rhubarb plant too. I feel the same way about blueberries. I think anywhere on your property where there's 6 hours of sunlight and you're thinking about throwing in a shrub, throw in a blueberry bush. Blueberry bushes are natives. They feed the bees, they feed the birds, they feed the people. So I'm a huge, huge fan of, if there's space and you're wondering, what would I like to put there? I say throw in a blueberry bush. Any other questions?
Nothing yet. I have a couple if you're done, but
That's
I
it.
can hold them.
On that, so we can dream of summer.
Sure. Yeah, so folks, please feel free to unmute and ask your question or enter
Yeah,
them in
let's
the
get everybody
chat.
unmuting. And I think people were afraid when you said recording, the
I
screen's going
know.
blank. Nobody wants to
You
be
can
on.
also, yeah, unmute without showing your video if you like. But my question, actually, Emma just entered a question. Do you have any favorite blueberry varieties?
I don't know that I have a favorite blueberry. I mean, there's the strawberry something, you got me. I'd have to look it up, but you can email me and we can talk direct. It's strawberry something that I got, and it was like hot pink. I loved that. Big fat berries too. When you do blueberries, I recommend people do multiple varieties so you can get them where they're early, mid, or late season bloomers. So I like to have the blueberries all through the season. I don't want to just eat blueberries one time. I want to have them spring, summer, and fall. So it's good to get multiple varieties. Blue Jay, I think, I'm not going to be able to pull it out of my head right now, but if you want to shoot me an email, I'll get you a list, because we have a lot of blueberry varieties around here that we can use. But again, you want to go with multiple, maybe 2 of each, and then you can be picking blueberries all season.
Wow.
Thanks for the question.
Another question, are strawberries a fun fruit to plant or are they tiresome?
I really think that. What were you thinking?
So I feed my woodchuck with strawberries.
I feed the
everything.
wildlife with it. It's a ground cover. I'd rather see strawberries than see pachysandra. So for me, I let my strawberries run wild. If I go out and I get a handful while I'm on my way to the garden or while I'm doing something, I'm thankful for it. Other than that, I'm feeding the wildlife, and I'm okay with feeding the wildlife. So to me, they're a great ground cover. I don't find them to be a nuisance, but the animals are going to get them. But if you think you're only going to plant like 4 or 5 strawberry plants and you're going to get enough strawberries, you'd have to net it, cage it, protect it, guard it with your life, because they're coming for it. And don't spray them, like let them go. Like strawberries are so ridden with pesticides. They're like in that top 10 danger food category. So I like just letting it grow wild in my yard. Wherever it takes over, it goes. And same with the raspberries. There's a lot of raspberries in my yard that are growing wild. I don't even like raspberries, but the birds like it. My kids like them. So
that was actually going to be my question. How do you control raspberries? Mine just spread and spread.
Don't cut them. You got to pull them. And now's the time to do your fruit pruning. So right now, if you have fruit trees, you prune them. If you have raspberries, you prune them. Blueberries, prune them. So my actual raspberry bed that I planted, I'll get in there and cut out the canes. But the wild raspberries that are growing all over the yard, I'm going to put big, thick gloves like the hard ones and go out there and rip them out. Anytime you cut them, they just come back. You got to go rip them out once the ground thaws.
Okay.
Get going, as soon as you possibly can do it. It's one of those jobs, like the sooner you can do it before they really start rooting in and growing, the better off you are.
Okay. Speaking of fruit, Stephanie asks, do you have any thoughts on grafted or other fruit trees?
I haven't grown a lot of fruit trees myself. It's something that I'm starting to get into because I do want to add it to the portfolio where we're doing all edible landscape. The fruit trees are important. So I do not have full experience on that, but I'm interested in it. It's like, people who talk about hybrids, there's a benefit to having a plant having stronger genetic from one plant into the other. So I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but I'm not opposed to doing it at all. I just don't have a lot of experience with it yet. Thinking about it though, because I like the idea of having the semi-dwarfs. I like the idea of not having to have a 30-foot apple tree. And then there's a lot of tomatoes that they're grafting now too. I haven't tried them yet. They're so expensive to buy. So I was thinking about trying to do it myself at some point, but I just haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. Jacqueline asks, if you're planting in spring, summer, and fall, do you use the same growing beds or do you need separate containers for every season?
It depends on the size of your growing boxes. It depends on how much you're growing, but the same. So spring right now in my garden will be radish, spinach, snap peas, arugula, and maybe some lettuces. That's going to be the second I can get out there and stick my hands in the dirt. It's not frozen and it's not soggy wet. I'm planting. And then maybe a few weeks later, I'll add lettuces. So if I have April and May for my early spring crops, when I pull out my romaine lettuce, I'm then going to plant a cucumber seed. When I pull out my snap peas, then I'm probably going to plant some green beans. So whatever else I've got growing there, I'll replace with the summer crops. So for the most part, you can use the same box, but ideally you're going to have multiple boxes. But you're not necessarily using multiple boxes to leave. I wouldn't leave one box empty. I would just do a quick crop. Radishes are like 30 days. Arugula is like 30 days. So just fill up all the space you have. Then when you're ready in June to plant, because I don't even necessarily do Memorial Day. A lot of people are just like, oh, Memorial Day is when the tomatoes are going in. No, they go in when, I like to wait a little bit and have the soil warm up and have my spring crops be complete and then start my summer crops. I hope that answered your question.
I hope so. Let's see. I'm going to go back to fruit. Can you give recommendations for pruning blueberry and grape plants?
Grape, no. I have a 50-year-old vine that I'm dying to get somebody here to prune. I'm tempted to just chop it all down to the ground and start over, but I don't think that that's the right answer. Blueberries right now, you can start pruning them, and it's pretty true for most shrubs. Anytime there's crossing, you want to prune it out because crossing causes rubbing, and think about a blister. Anytime you are rubbing and you get a blister, it opens it up. And then there's, opportunity for pests and for disease. So any cross branches you want to prune out, any dead branches, any broken branches, if something's bent over and it's kind of like hanging on there, get in there and prune it out. The other thing with blueberries is like every 3 years, it's good to go in and really clean out the middle and let the plant kind of have a regenerated stage. So pruning is important for our fruit trees. You just want to get in there now before, you don't want to wait until summer to prune. This early February, March is a great time to prune your trees and your blueberries, raspberries.
Great. Speaking of pests, do you have a recommendation for safe natural pesticide for leafy greens? All our kale, collards, lettuces got eaten by some kind of insect last fall.
Okay, so I would say you really want to start like what's eating it. First of all, what is the pest that's causing this damage? And the way that I treat my gardens is I go in there and I look at the top side of the leaf and the underside of the leaf. It's likely a cabbage looper, although that wouldn't eat your lettuce, but you can do a row cover instead of using a spray. You can just like take a hoop. I use PVC pipe and I bend it over and I just put a fabric over it. That helps to keep the moths out, which are what are laying the eggs, and then the little caterpillars, make Swiss cheese out of your kale. And all of those cabbage loopers and those caterpillars love all the brassicas. If you are going to spray, Bacillus BT is a common organic spray. With our bees being in such jeopardy, like you really do want to think about when you're spraying, even if it's organic. So just try to do it if the wind's not blowing. If you see a lot of bee activity and they're out there foraging and they're getting their pollen and their nectar, maybe don't spray then. I tend to spray at the end of the day. And when I spray, I'm close to the plant and then I use my hand and I wipe the stuff on, I wipe it over the leaf. But the biggest thing you can do is be watching and be a detective and, be out there looking for your pest. And the second you see one little bite, then flip the leaf over and look, and you'll probably see the little baby caterpillars, and you can easily just squish them and then you're done and you don't have to spray. If it gets out of control and all of a sudden you find yourself with an infestation, and if the BT doesn't work, you can jump up to a spinosad, or I use Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew. That's a spray that I'm comfortable using on my food. I tend to harvest everything, get rid of the leaves that are infested, and then give the plant a spray. And usually 2 to 3 days later, it'll recover. But that's because I've only been at that garden once a week and I missed the opportunity to catch it. You really can catch it. Just get out there and just be on a hunt for bugs early morning or later in the day. And if you can catch it early, you can usually just swipe them with your finger and not have to worry about spraying. But Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew is what I use.
She's continuing her question with any thoughts on what to do about slugs.
Slugs are gross, and I hate them. No, I shouldn't say that. I just hired a young girl named Lily to come on board with me, and she gathered slugs and she kept them as pets. And I, Lisa, I couldn't make fun of her. I mean, it would be mean, but I was like, what? Like, and I'm like, you're hired. Any girl who's gonna like feed slugs in a jar in her room, you're hired. No. So beer works. Slam down a beer, leave a little in the thing, bury it in the garden so that the lip of the mouth of the beer can is open. They'll climb in there because they love the yeast. They drink it, they drown. It's disgusting. Hand pick. You can put copper around the outside of your growing boxes. If we have a wet season, you know the slugs are coming. And another product I use is called Sluggo. So that's another one. So first I'm going to hand pick because hand picking is the best. And then I'm going to add beer. I'm going to drink my beer and lay it in the dirt so that the lip of the beer mouth is laying so they can crawl in there. And then if that doesn't work and things get out of control, then I'm going to use Sluggo. I use any pesticide treatments, whether they're organic or not, as a last method. First comes hand picking, scouting, then comes, and sometimes it's your conditions, right? So slugs, if it's raining a lot in the spring, we don't have a control over that. But if you're getting a lot of slugs, it might be because you're overwatering. So set up your conditions to be healthy. And then hopefully your garden can handle the pests. Our gardens can't handle the pests when they're stressed out from improper watering, or the garden wasn't placed in the right location and it's not getting enough sun, or you overplanted and there's no air circulation, no airflow. So you kind of want to set your garden up to be healthy, and then hopefully it'll be okay on its own.
Great. Can you give any suggestions for plantings that are helpful for bees?
Tons. And what I would recommend is that you hop onto my website, gardensbyrenee.com, and I have a blog, and there's a blog on pollinator habitat, and there's a whole list for our area. So I think that that's probably a little bit easier than me going over it right now. Anise hyssop is one of my favorite bee feeders, but that's because I do garden to glass events, and it's like a licorice tasting herb. And so it's fantastic with bourbons and whiskeys, and the bees love it. But the best thing would be to hop on that blog, and maybe I can send it to you via email if you want, but it's pollinator habitat, and there's a whole list of great plants, blueberries being one of them.
Okay.
And herbs. They love oregano and mint and basil. And that's the other thing I don't have written down in this, and I might add it to this document. But when you're planting in your gardens, if you have the room, 2 for you and 2 for them. So maybe 4 basil plants for you, maybe 2 or 3 for the bees, let them flower. Same with dill. Like maybe you need 1 dill plant for making pickles or for your salads or tzatziki, whatever you're going to use your dill for, but then throw 4 or 5 in somewhere else for the butterflies, because it's not just about feeding. We want to feed all pollinators. We want to take care of not just the bees, but we want to take care of good, but all of them. And I even say like a healthy environment includes bad bugs. It's just the reality of it. Like if you've nuked your property, like it's not good.
Mhm. I have a question about seedlings. So I try to start from seed, and I get these tiny spindly things that die, and then I go buy plants.
Well, A for effort, and I'm glad you're trying. So the spindly is an indicator of not enough light. And can I turn this? This is my grow light. Can you see it? Can you tell me if you can see it, Courtney?
Yep.
Okay, so that's my grow light stand. It's 4 tall, and that runs for 14 hours, sometimes 16 hours.
Oh, wow.
So it's great to think I'm going to throw some seedlings and I'm going to have them at the windowsill. It's just not enough light in the winter. So you do need supplementary lighting. You can get grow lights. You can make your own. You need lights. And then when you have the lights, you want to set the lights as low as you can possibly get it without touching the plant. Because if it's high, again, the plant is stretching towards the light. So maybe you just need to get yourself a grow light, start small, start with 1, and then just make sure that you're adjusting it and running it for 14 hours easy a day. They need a lot of light. The spindly is just lack of light.
And what about, I buy those little discs that expand and plant in those. Like, should I be transferring them up to another size? Because I
If
feel like
it
that's part of
depends
my
on the
problem.
plant. So like if you had a pepper plant, like give me an example of like what you're growing. What are you starting from seeds if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, like a cucumber or a tomato.
Okay, so a tomato, if it gets to be 16 inches tall and it's skinny and it's all like no leafy and it's yellowy, you can bury your tomato plant all the way down until there's only 2 inches above the ground because all of the little hairs that are on the stem are actually going to turn into roots.
Oh,
You can't
wow.
do that with a cucumber. So with
Okay.
cucumber, if it gets too spindly, you're going to hope for the best. But if you start with a seedling that's spindly and yellow and skinny and limp, I hate to tell you, man, it's almost better to throw it out and get a new one. Because
Yeah.
if you start with a weak seedling, the bugs are going to be like, we got a weak one, we're going in. And then they're going to annihilate it. So
Yeah.
the grow lights and cucumbers are better started outside anyway. A lot of seeds like to be started outside. Like right now I have peppers growing because peppers take a long time. So they're in the grow light. Now, I'm not really answering your question fully. I get distracted easily, but as far as transplanting, up potting them, you do that. Again, with a tomato, if my seedling is this big, I'm going to bury it up to here and stick it in a bigger container. My
Okay.
pepper plants, which right now are only like this big, I'll transplant them into a bigger pot. They'll be in the green, they'll be in here under these grow lights for a long time. Like they won't make it out into the greenhouse until the greenhouse is 65 or 70 day and night. But with the pepper plants, I'm not going to bury it. I'm going to just stick it in a bigger container.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't love those things. I use all recycled containers for my seed starting. I use egg cartons, the plastic ones, not the cardboard ones. I use lettuce containers. Last night, my friend and I had takeout from Be Good. It was awesome. And then the containers are cardboard and they have a little plastic. So it's good for like a dome. So if I wanted to start some arugula or kale, I could do it today and stick it outside. This week is going to be plenty nice that they could be outside. So
Hmm.
I like to use all recycled material for my seed starting. And when I transplant my plants to the bigger pots, I use plant containers that I had from last year. So anything that I bought last year, it's rinsed and stored in my yard so that this year when I need those containers, I'm again reusing because we don't want
Okay.
to be buying plastic and just contributing to the landfill problem. There's no reason to do that.
Thank you. All right, we have a couple more questions.
Great.
Do you ever use seeds from store veggies? For example, I bought an organic red pepper and saved the seeds. I'm wondering how well they'll germinate. I also have dried cherry tomatoes from last season with the seeds intact. Wondering if they'll do well.
I think it's a great idea and I think go for it. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? It didn't happen. But the pepper you need to do now, because now is pepper time, you're a little bit behind. Like we need to start peppers now. I don't know how that'll work. I think because it's organic, it should be fine. And the tomatoes should totally be fine. I have cherry tomato sun golds that drop in the garden and this year there's going to be a ton of tomatoes out there. So I do think that those little cherry tomatoes that you saved will be totally fine. It's a little early to start tomatoes, but what you could do is you could do a little test and take one of those from that cherry tomato and see if it starts. And then that way you'll know when it's time to start our tomatoes in a few weeks that you have viable seed. It'll germinate. Like just do one today. Just go throw it in a pot and see what happens.
Mhm.
And then the peppers, I would get on it like now.
Cool. Um, Another question, do you have thoughts on the best way to start pea pods from seeds?
Um, Peas like shoots or just like snap peas now, go for it. It's you can pre-sprout them by taking paper towel and putting them in the paper towel and wetting the paper towel and laying them out and then putting them in a Ziploc baggie and just sticking them on your counter somewhere. And once they pre-sprout, then you plant them in the ground. So maybe not right now because it's still frozen outside, but if this week, if things, because St. Patty's Day is traditionally when you can start snap peas and snow peas outside. The difference between snap peas and snow peas. Snap peas are the fat ones, the edible pods, and snow peas are the flat ones that you kind of see more in Asian food. So you can pre-sprout by putting them in paper towel in a Ziploc baggie, leave the Ziploc baggie open, but then put it on a windowsill. Keep it moist. I usually just use a spritzer and spray it. They sprout like in 3 to 4 days. You can also use an egg carton and fill it with soil and just put the seed in there and keep that at a windowsill. So you can start snap peas, snow peas now inside if you wanted to use an egg carton. If you want to direct sow them, you can pre-sprout them with a paper towel or just direct sow them after St. Patty's Day if the ground is thawed and workable. Workable soil in garden terms means you can grab a handful and squeeze it and it's not dripping wet. So it's thawed. It's not just thawed, it's thawed, but it's not soaking wet. Soaking wet just will rot your seeds.
So Caroline joined us a little late and is asking, and it bears repeating, any suggestions for where to buy soil and the best way to incorporate compost into soil?
So like we talked about before, I have a special blend that is sold at Pure Solutions in Weston, and you can tell them that I want Renee's garden blend, and it's half compost, half soil, half loam, and that is what I recommend. I recommend using a blend. I don't just straight up compost is great to use if you're top dressing. Like sometimes I just throw compost on my lawn, or sometimes I just add compost to the garden bed spring and fall, and then I'm like a no-till believer. I don't like getting in there and destroying layers of life. There's so many microorganisms that are living in our soil. I tend to let it be and just kind of top dress it with a couple inches of compost and maybe scratch it in a little bit. I'm not a big, turn it in, flip it over, I'm not doing that. I'm letting the ground be and hopefully, cultivating like inches of healthy soil.
Great. I have a question about irrigation. I've never attempted or thought about that. So if you could just talk generally about how you do that.
Sure. I mean, for anyone who's a DIY person, there's a company called Dripworks, and they have very inexpensive kits. They plug right into a spigot. I recommend you get a diverter on it so that you can have a spigot for your timer, and then you can have a spigot for your hands to wash or drink or whatever. But Dripworks is the company that I use, and I think you can get a kit with a timer and enough for like 8 boxes, 4x8 boxes for like $150. It uses the spaghetti tubing, which is something that I highly recommend. A lot of the times you'll get irrigation companies come out, and if you say to them, hey, I want some drip lines, you would think that it would be a more common, it's just not. So we want drip because it drips the water right to the root of the plant. Overhead watering, sprinkler heads is not good for the plants. It creates disease, it wastes water. So you really want to target the root zone, and that's what drip irrigation does. The kits that I'm talking about at Dripworks, there's just like it's like this width of my pinky, and it's a line, and then it's got holes in it. And so the other reason why I like it is because when I'm planting in the spring or when I'm changing out crops summer or fall, I can just lift the line, add my compost, and then put the line back down. So it's not dug in underneath the ground. So I love, and drip irrigation is like, it just drips exactly what you need. You have a timer. So if you're getting a lot of rain, you don't need to use it. I only use my drip irrigation when I actually need it. I'm not someone who runs a clock and has it going every day or every other day. It goes when I need it.
Okay. Any thoughts on cover crops? If you don't use them, do you do anything special for your beds over the winter?
I like the cover crops. I think it's hard to use the green manure in raised beds a little bit because it's hard to turn it in. But I do like to use them for clients and for yards that I have large plot space in ground. I love legumes are great. They're nitrogen fixing, so they're pulling nitrogen from the atmosphere and depositing into the roots, which is fantastic. I like the idea of cover crops because it keeps the earth protected over the winter. So a huge fan of that. I do think it's hard to use if you have a 3x10 or a 4x8 growing box. It's hard to use a green manure like that. So what I use is either salt marsh hay, which was nearly impossible to get last year, or I use a straw hay mulch that you can get. It was called Lucerne. Russell's was carrying it. I don't know. I think it's got a rebranding now. It's a new name, but it's a mulch. It's a straw hay kilned mulch. And I like to use that. But salt marsh hay is probably my favorite. The seaweed based stuff is my favorite if you can get that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, and I like buckwheat shells. That's a new one for me. Last year was the first time I used it. I'm a sensory person. So for me, running my hands over the buckwheat husks is awesome. It's relaxing. It's cool. It feels great. I love it. I think it's going to be a little challenging when I sow my seeds like carrots and basil. And if I'm direct sowing in the ground, I think it's going to be hard with the buckwheat shells. So I'm going to probably push them back and have my line and then wait for my plants to come up. But I applied the buckwheat shells to 2 of my clients' gardens. One of them has 14 beds and one of them has 6. And last year was the first year that I did it. And I love the way it looks. It's clean, it's modern, it's brown, it's cool. It feels great. My question will be how it does with seeding, sowing seeds.
And then I'll just remind folks, feel free to enter any questions.
Yeah, this was fun.
I've been joined by this little gardener. But my question is, so I shared with everyone the seed starting catalog or site that you have on your social media, but in terms of like when to layer certain crops. So you talked about like starting this in the spring and then harvesting, like that kind of rotation.
It's more of an organic flow for me, and it's best to follow on social media because I'm literally going to be showing you in the garden when I'm doing it, or I'll say, hey, we're going to be planting cucumbers next, or now is time to plant our tomatoes. Or I don't have a set calendar because I don't think that with Mother Nature being the way she is right now, like what's the set calendar? I mean, like we could get snow next week. Like, I don't know. You kind of got to just follow the weather, follow your gut, and actually connect enough with Mother Nature that you're out there and that you're able to feel what's happening. So with the specific planting calendars, you can get Farmer's Almanac will give you a good one, but you're going to want to make sure that you have a little flexibility with that. You got to be like a willow and bend because things are changing. Like the weather patterns are changing and nothing's the same as it was. And I don't think it will be the same next year for us. It's just always, you're always just like, what happened? I mean, last April was one of the worst springs we've had. It was soaking wet. I wasn't out there planting. And I'm hoping that this year, we're planting in March. But if you follow on social media, I think that's your best bet to get kind of like what's live time, what's happening now. And I try to give people enough of a heads up. The other thing is in my home garden, I'm 2 weeks ahead of my clients. So when I do things in my home garden, it's usually 2 weeks before other people are doing it. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a heads up.
Oh. Sorry.
Okay. Get it.
Let's see. How do you know when to, Jacqueline's asking, how do you know when to use drip irrigation? In other words, do different plants require different amounts of water? And is there a resource to learn those variations?
Yes. So most of our vegetable gardens require 1 to 2 inches per week. And here's your best tool, your finger. So what you want to do is get out there and stick your finger in the soil because you're not going to be able to tell by the surface if you need water or not. We want the root zone wet. We want 4 to 6 inches deep, moist. So if it looks dry on top and then you're watering, you might be overwatering. And so, I try to do like run it for 20 minutes every other day. But then if we have like low humidity and we haven't had any rain, then I'm going to need to add more. If we have rain after rain after rain, you can get a water meter in your garden, just those little plastic containers that you stick in the garden. I love those because if it rains and it shows we got an inch or an inch and a half of water, I'm not watering for days. I'll go back out 3-4 days later, stick my finger in and decide whether or not I want to run the drip for 20-30 minutes. Again, it's about connecting and being out there and kind of feeling your soil and seeing what you need. And you don't do it in the middle of the day. If you go out in the middle, you're not watering in the middle of the day. You want to water at like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Try to avoid watering at night. Plants don't like to go to bed wet. They tend to be cold and they don't like it. It stresses them out. So that would be the other tip I would want to give is definitely try to water early morning. It gives time for the plants to dry out and to absorb that water during the day.
I'm definitely guilty of that. I'm writing that down.
Overwatering or
watering at night.
Because you forgot, because you're busy and life is crazy, and that's true for so many people. So you shouldn't feel bad about that. But that nighttime watering is not the best.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Please feel free to unmute or type them in. I have a question. Is there any like cool online tool to see where the best place in your yard gets the more sun, or is it better to just like observe?
I would observe, and actually like right now, before the tree leaves are out, if you just go out and you check and you see the skeleton of the branches, know that those branches, the shadows, those are then going to be filled in with leaves. I do have a sun chart. There's apps you can get on your phone. I have one on my phone. I love it. I dork out on it. It's just fun. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's chart, or it just charts the sun for you, and you can kind of get your whole yard.
Okay.
You can even get it, like you could say November, June, whatever. So I would just go into your app store and look out sun chart or something. I can't remember what it was called, but I love that.
Cool. And we have one more
Fun to play with that
question.
too. And you
Yeah.
probably get to know your yard, right? Like you kind of know where the sunspots are.
Yeah.
It's whether or not you want to give up those
Right.
sunspots for a kitchen garden. Now that's what it really comes down to, is like, yes, I know that the front yard is full sun, but do I want to put a growing box in my front yard? And the answer is yes, you do.
Carolyn is asking if you have overhead sprinklers already in place, can you make do instead of switching to drip?
I think you can have your irrigation company swap those heads out for drip.
Okay.
And yeah, if you have to do with what you have, I mean, having irrigation, having a sprinkler head overhead is better than having to hand water, but I would recommend you definitely water early morning so that your leaves can dry, because you'll get massive mildew and fungus, and the mildews come on heavy when you overhead water.
Okay.
And then also in that situation, like I wouldn't, like if I'm planting zucchini and I know that the only choice I have is to overhead water, then I'm going to space those plants out. So if the spacing is 3 feet, I'm going to give them 4, because you're going to want that airflow. The leaves need to dry out in between.
Good to know. I think folks are wrapping up and
Fantastic.
wrapping off.
Yeah, we're gone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Fun. Get ready. It's coming.
Yeah, and I'll send everyone's email to Renee so she can add you to her newsletter, unless you let me know you don't want that. And happy growing. I hope to have Renee back soon.
Yeah, we can do lots too. There's all kinds of things we can do. So I look forward to growing with my community. Thank you, Courtney. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
All
Everybody
right.
have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.
One quick question.
Ooh,
Oh, Maria, go ahead. Go ahead.
One quick question. I get bugs on my zucchini and cucumbers every year. How do I avoid that? They're the stink bugs or the yellow and white cucumber beetle.
Oh, the cucumber beetle sucks. That is, you can use sticky tape for cucumber beetle. You want to move your crops this year. If it's been happening year after year after year, move your crops somewhere else, confuse them. Don't let them come back. The borer, which is your stink bug, it's laying the eggs in your zucchini's stalk. You can wrap it with aluminum foil. You can cover it with soil. You can use a clay-like material called surround. So the mother comes in early June and she lays her eggs, and then the borer climbs through your vine and kills it. I dig them out all the time. It's disgusting. I have videos on it, but I'd rather dig out the borer that's killing my zucchini plant than let my zucchini plant die. So there's
out from the soil.
You dig them out from your zucchini vine.
Oh, okay.
You'll see, like, I know you, I'm sorry?
I think I may have read that last year. So it's at the very bottom near the soil.
Like, do you remember seeing like a sawdusty material looking like orange, brown? That's because inside is the larva of the borer climbing through, eating your zucchini from the inside out.
Okay.
And so if you see that sawdust stuff, you cut with a knife above it, and you'll be able to just get that thing out of there. Your plant will live.
Oh,
Ideally, you want to catch it before by using row covers so that the mama can't come in, stick her tail in and lay eggs, or aluminum foil, covering it with mulch, using that clay-like material called it's surround. And again, if you've had this like time and time again, maybe throw a couple zucchini plants in whiskey barrels out in your driveway or somewhere else and take a break, because they're there and they're making more babies and they know that you're there. So, you know, stop growing that. I've had, my mom is in Truro and we have massive property down there, and we had to stop growing. We took 1 year off 1 year because the stink bugs, they just got too bad. So we just stopped for a year, and then the following year we went back to it. But don't stop all the way. Maybe just grow
Yeah.
somewhere else in your yard or grow a different crop there.
yeah, they also went after my sunflowers,
Oh,
flower plants. They go after that too, right?
yeah. I don't know. I haven't had any problems, but you can do sticky tapes, and
Okay, where do you buy the sticky tape?
you can grab it on Amazon. Just Google sticky tape, yellow sticky tape. And the other thing, it's Maria, right?
Yeah.
You know, have a little science thing going here and get online, and you know who your pests are. You're already so far ahead of the game. You know what's causing the problem. So Google the beetle and then learn its life cycle. And then that way, when is that mama cucumber beetle coming to lay her eggs? And that's when you're going to go out there and protect your garden, either with row covers or, you know, organic pesticides if you need
Where do
to.
you put the yellow sticky tape on the plant itself, or?
It goes in the ground near it and it attracts the beetle to it.
Okay,
So,
thank
but
you.
if you have a lot of them, like that's not going to be enough. You're going to want to do multiple things. Number one would be not do that crop there again this year, because we know that you have a problem. And
Yeah.
then two, do the row covers, learn the life cycle of that pest specifically, so you know when you need to cover versus not cover. Like this year, I'm covering at a client I have in Carlisle because it's 2,600 square feet and I can't be cutting out
Mhm.
borers. I spend 2 days there just cutting out borers, so I have to row cover that. And I think it's end of May, but I have to double check it. But I got to get a row cover on there because I just can't be doing it. I don't have the time.
Okay, thank you so much. I really
You're
appreciate it.
you're welcome. Good luck growing.
Oh, thank you. Bye.
Yeah. All
Any
right.
I think we're good.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you
stuff.
again. We'll
Good
talk to
luck
you
with
soon.
everything.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Ciao.
Bye.